You know what, folks? It's been a month. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome or welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. So today I have a wrap up for the books I read in the back half of the month of September. I did a mid-month check-in. You can go check that out. I'll link down below about the 11 books that I finished in the first half of the month. And so in this video, I'm going to cover the 14 books, if you can believe it, that I read in the back half of the month. And there will be timestamps below if you want to jump right to those books. But first, a little bit about what has been going on with me, I think is good to talk about. So over the past 2 weeks, I did lead a meditation retreat that was here at Sarah. My students from Bangalore came to visit me here at Sarah, so that was nice. It was a lot easier to lead a retreat here than it is to go somewhere else. And other than that, we've been on holiday in the monastery. We only have 2 real holidays throughout the year. One is this 10 days that are coming to an end right now, which is after the rains retreat. We have about 10 days off. And then at the Tibetan New Year, we also have about 3 to 4 weeks off. Other than that, we don't really get any holidays. So the past 10 days have been a holiday, and I've gotten a lot of reading done. Now, I had a lot of other work that I had intended to do, but I didn't have the motivation to do it. And that kind of rolls into what my BookTube life is like right now. You know, last week is the first week since I've started BookTube, so now a little over a year, where I have not had 2 videos released in that week. I only had one, it was a review, and I just couldn't find the inspiration to make another video. You know, I'm going to be honest, I'm not feeling burned out, that's not the right word, but I don't feel like I have a lot of inspiration to be making videos right now. I know for other people, making videos is really easy. You just turn it on and you record and you go. For me, it's just more work. Even doing a review feels like more work, in part because as a monk, like even doing what I'm doing right now, being on the internet talking about pop culture is already walking a fine line that not everyone finds appropriate. And for me personally, to be doing this, it's not just about talking about books and talking about literature. The reason I engage in pop culture is for a way to, learn something more about myself and to engage in some sort of, I don't want to say spiritual practice because that sounds a little too far out there, but that's what it is, right? How I can take the mundane world and my spiritual life and find a way to bridge the two and encourage others to do the same, even if it's not through Buddhism, but just through using art and hobby and fun as a way to engage in introspection and so forth. And so part of what, the reason I'm on BookTube is to do that. And it's not an easy line to walk all the time. And so to make videos just, shooting the shit or just talking about anything, it's not my style and I don't feel comfortable doing it. So finding the inspiration to make videos has been difficult, right? The inspiration, but also just like the effort that it takes me. Because also I make mistakes and I have to edit these videos. And I know some people don't like edited videos. They just want you to go off the cuff. And I just don't, when I teach, you can watch any of my teachings. I'll teach for 2-3 hours straight, and that's no problem. But when I'm talking about this, since it's not specifically in the realm of Dharma, of Buddhist teachings, then it's not as easy for me to feel like I'm doing a good job of what I want to be communicating in a way that is true to myself and is also entertaining and useful for all of you. So it takes a lot of effort for me. And, the videos I enjoy doing most is I enjoy doing reviews where I can actually look at a book and find something about the book that's meaningful. So I enjoy doing that, though that's not always possible. Sometimes my reviews are just pretty basic, but I enjoy finding a book and seeing how I can explore that book in a way that is like useful for my life. And then I like making videos that I think would fall into the category more of like video essays. And I know I tend to go on and on and on. So, of course, a video essay tends to be much longer. That's not my goal to make these long videos, but I want to talk about places where literature and hobby and fun and reading intersect with other important aspects of our life. And so I've tried to make those videos, but the problem with that is I don't want to feel like I'm being forced to do it. I don't mean by the audience. I just mean like, I don't want to feel like I'm forcing an issue. I want it to be natural and just, I want to be inspired by what's going on. And I don't feel that right now. And if I don't feel that, I don't want to like manipulate my ideas just to create content. So at the moment, I don't have a lot of energy or inspiration. There are a lot of great tags going around. And there are other people doing great videos that are the kind that I think are inspiring. I just don't have, the energy in me right now. For instance, Gareth at Book Songs and Other Magic just created his own great tag, which is based on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he combines some very like literary book-based prompts as well as prompts about poetry or lyrics that you find moving, and then a prompt right in the middle of what's the meaning of life. And he may or may not have called me out in his video, but that sounds like a lot of fun, Or Brian over at Bookish Texan just had a wonderful video about optimism and why optimism is important right now, considering the state of the world. And then he suggested a number of books that he feels, have at least can either lead towards optimism or like have some sort of sense of hope instead of gloom and doom, grimdark kind of feel. I think those are great videos. I would have loved if I had thought of those kind of ideas. Anyway, I don't know. I guess I'm just in a little bit of a creative rut because the truth is, every time I have some ideas, right? But every time I think of making a video, even just a review video, even just this video right now, I think of how much time and effort it's going to take me to make the video, edit the video, put all the pieces together. And I realize I would just rather be reading a book or maybe knitting. And so the videos don't get made. So we'll see. I do have a bunch of review videos planned for October for arcs that I have read already, and now I just need to make the reviews for them. So those will probably be coming out throughout the month of October. And after that, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not taking a break. That's not the plan. I just need to, have it feel comfortable to be making these videos. I will say this all comes at a time. I don't know if it's convenient or not convenient, but I'm going to be very busy with real life in the next couple months. And the truth is, the first and third weeks of November here at the monastery, we have our two most important exams. And, I already had 2 exams last month, and there'll be one more exam in January. But these exams are, the big guys. The first one's a debate exam where you have to get up and debate in front of a few hundred people, and as well as 5 judges. You're only given 5 minutes to prepare. You're given a topic. You have 5 minutes to prepare, and then you have to debate for 10 minutes. And then you just sit down and answer, respond to another person debating for 10 minutes. And that is covering a whole year's worth of material. And then shortly after that, we're going to have our written exam, which is going to be an exam which is a 3-hour sit-down written exam, again, where you cover all the material you studied all year long. So all the month of October is going to be really dedicated to preparing for those, studying. We have study sessions with our classmates, and we still have full-time class. Like, we're not done with class. So we still have full-time regular debate sessions and class and everything, and then study sessions and extra review, and then personal study. So the month of October is going to be quite busy. Then I have my exams in November, as I mentioned. And then as soon as the exams are done, I have to go up to Tawang. So Mun Tawang is a region in Arunachal Pradesh. I live in Karnataka. I'll put a map up. So Sarajaya Monastery is in Karnataka. It is near Bangalore, I guess about 6 hours away from Bangalore. Bangalore is the big city with the international airport. So that's where I live. That is, I guess kind of southwest, the southwestern part of the country. Arunachal Pradesh is the most northeastern state in the country. And all the monks I live with in my particular house are from Arunachal Pradesh. And one of the monks I lived with, who is living there now, he has finished his degree, and he has a school there that he started, and he has a big conference coming up, which is in partnership with the government of the state, and it is a conference in celebration of the 6th Dalai Lama, who was born in Arunachal Pradesh, in Tawang. And I'm not really sure why I'm going, but I'm going. I've been asked to go help do all the preparation work and be a liaison for other international guests and so forth. So I'm going to go there. Now, to go up to Arunachal Pradesh, the easiest way is you fly to Guwahati, and then from Guwahati, you take a car for 18 hours up into the mountains on a single lane road that goes up the mountain and then back down again on the other side. So it is a trip to get there. And last time I was there, I've been there twice. I didn't have any internet, barely enough internet to even respond to WhatsApp messages. So I don't anticipate that I'll be making any content while I'm there. And that's going to take me the next 2.5 weeks, maybe, being up there. Then when I come back to my monastery after that, I have to go for the winter debate session. The winter debate session we do 1 month every year, and it's not at my monastery this year, so I'm traveling again. So I'll be in another part of the state, living in a dorm room with all of my classmates. I won't have a computer with me, and again, I'll have intermittent internet access at best. So, and then I'll get back from that in January, and I have my final exam of the year. So the truth is, from October, November, December, and the first 2 weeks of January, I don't really know how much time I'm going to have to be making content. I'll probably always be able to find time to watch other people's videos, and I'll definitely find time to read. I just don't know how many videos I'll be making during those 3.5 months, just because the way the schedule lines up this year, it's going to have me quite busy. Maybe it's a good opportunity for me to take a little bit of a break because I don't have a choice, and then we'll see, how things shake out after that. Okay, so after that very long-winded introduction, what are the 14 books that I did finish in the back half of September? It's been a good 2 weeks. Some of the books I read were phenomenal, some were okay, so it's a good mix. The first book I finished is one of the books that I'm reading for the Ursula K. Le Guin 2025 prize. This is one of the books on the shortlist. This is called Remember You Will Die by Eden Robbins. And this book is interesting. It's an epistolary novel, and it's all done through the point of view of obituaries for the most part. There are some news articles as well, but it's mostly obituaries. And it's obituaries of, obviously fake people, but all of them are kind of circling around this AI and who has become sentient and had a child through different technologies, and then where the child of this AI has ended up. And the way the obituaries kind of work is you read one, and then maybe one person referenced in that obituary is all of a sudden the next obituary. And then maybe someone referenced in that, or some art movement referenced in that, is the next article. And then in that article, there's another person, and then you read their obituary. So it covers over a century's worth of time and space, and it feels like you're falling down a rabbit hole into investigate. And in that way, I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting kind of collage type piece. It doesn't have any firm answers. There isn't a firm narrative. There isn't even a primary character that you're following throughout all these different obituaries. It feels like a collage or a pastiche, and I enjoyed reading it, but it wasn't my favorite book of the month, let's say. The next book I want to talk about is another book I read for the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize, and this is The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy, and this one I loved. This is a second world fantasy, and in it, the main character is a young girl, or a 16-year-old girl named Laurel, who was born a boy, but she understands herself as a girl, and she wants to be a witch because witches travel around the country and do good for other people, but only girls can be witches. So she pretends to be her best friend, who her best friend was promised to the witches. And so her best friend wants to train to be a knight. She wants to train to be a witch. So she pretends to be her best friend, and she starts traveling with these witches. And it's just really an interesting, kind of soft fantasy story about coming into yourself, knowing who you are. And there's a really interesting political discussion. Like the witches have this almost anarchist way of understanding the world and the way of understanding hierarchy and order. Whereas there are all these different levels of knights and duchesses and other politicians who are trying to tell people what to do and trying to exert control over the world. And the witches are kind of like a wrench in that machine that are not letting the wheels of oppression run quite so smoothly. So I really enjoyed this novel quite a lot, and I'll probably talk about it a bit more when I do my wrap-up for all 8 books in the shortlist of the Ursula K. Le Guin Award. Now, the next 2 books I want to talk about are the 2 nonfiction books I read this month. The first one is How Fascism Works, and this is by Jason Stanley. And this was good. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I also think it was really depressing. This was written, in 2018, I think, and where the country is now versus where it was then is so wildly different. And also, if you're someone that is somewhat politically engaged, none of what he says here is wildly new. But he's looking at how fascist regimes, or people that are aspiring to be fascists, use technology, use the media, use all different types of social apparatus to slowly push a society into authoritarianism. And he shows examples, both historical examples as well as sociological studies, and then compares that to contemporary US life. And so, it's not great. It's not like it doesn't feel good to read this book. Like I said, if you're already politically engaged, then none of this is going to be wildly new. But at the same time, it is useful to read because it is so well researched, and it does kind of lay things out quite clearly. And if you look at where we were in 2018 when this was first published and where we are now, like I said, it's not inspiring. He doesn't have a lot of concrete action plans. He's more about diagnosing the problem. He's not a community organizer. He's an academic. And, he recently left the country, I believe. So this isn't about what to do. It's just about realizing how bad things are. So I don't know. I guess I'm glad I read it. But yeah, it wasn't very uplifting. The next nonfiction book I read is The Wager. This is by David Grann. Earlier in the month, I read Killer of the Flower Moon, which I really enjoyed by him. And this I also really enjoyed. His style of narrative nonfiction I think is really compelling. This one, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did Killers of the Flower Moon. It's looking at the ship, the Wager, which was a British colonial ship that was going to fight the Spanish Armada to gain all these riches. And it is to some extent trying to be an indictment of colonialism, but the politics of it kind of feel tacked on to the story. What he does is he's found a whole lot of historical materials, including journals and log entries and all these things. And through those, he has pieced together a narrative, and he follows a few key characters on the ship. And, the story of the Wager is that it went out to sea, it was shipwrecked, and then 2 years later, a group of survivors showed back up in London. And then, think 2 years after that, more survivors showed up in London and said that they had been a mutiny, and there's all, the captain shows up in that later group, and he says that the first group had mutinied against him, and of like the, I don't know, like 450 sailors on the ship, there were only about 20 or something like that survived. And so it's a really kind of breathtaking story, and full of drama, and he follows through individual characters. So I didn't like it quite as much as Killers of the Flower Moon, but it was really fun to read, and it was exciting. It felt like an action adventure story. And I think David Grant's style and the way he takes nonfiction but makes it read as if it were a fictional story is really engaging, right? So that was the second nonfiction book I read this month that I did quite enjoy. And I have one more book by David Grant in my queue on Libby, and so we'll see if I get to it this upcoming month or not. The next book I want to talk about is City of the Dead by Brian Keene. This is the sequel to The Rising. These are his zombie books. These are part of the new wave of zombie entertainment and zombie survivalist horror. This came out a little over 2 decades ago, and it was fine. It wasn't great. It literally repeats the last chapter of the first book as the first chapter of this book, which I thought was interesting. And then it goes from there. It's very bleak. It's very gritty. It's not an optimistic zombie story, which it does feel more realistic. The take on zombies is interesting. I think I mentioned this when I did my review of The Rising, where they aren't the dead come back to life. They are these interdimensional demons, essentially. We want to call them demons, who are using our bodies because they want to, they've been cast to like the nether realms and they want to escape. So everything they do is to kind of spit in the eye of the creator who cast them out. So they intentionally do things that are really awful and treat people in horrible ways, because that is just more like twisting the knife to the creator who has banished them for so long. So it is it's a bleak story, and it is definitely, it wears its age really clearly. Like, never mind that some of it is a little bit insensitive in the way things are written about, but also just Brian Keene has improved as a writer phenomenally in the last 2 decades. The Rising, I believe, was his first novel. And this one, I don't know where it is, like how soon after The Rising he wrote this in terms of what other books he published, but it is clear that his writing has gotten a lot better in the last 2 decades. This is very worksman-like. Do you know what I mean? And the dialogue, some of the dialogue is quite rough. I'm glad I read it because the Rising series is kind of pivotal in, 21st century, the re-emergence of zombie horror in the 21st century. And I like Brian Keene's other writing. And, I just earlier in the month, I talked about a book he edited that was a collection of short stories that would take place in the world of The Stand. So I think he is like a really important figure in the world of contemporary horror. This book, I'm glad I read it. Not great. If you have run out of other bleak zombie material to read, then you should definitely read it. It's fun in that regard, but it's not going to change your life otherwise. The next book I want to talk about is Shitshow by Chris Panettiere. And now this was you get exactly what you expect you're going to get from a book called Shitshow. The reason I picked it up is because Chris Panettiere is currently a guest on one of my favorite podcasts called Talking Scared, where they interview different horror authors about whatever books are coming out. And they're doing a year-long or maybe multi-year-long deep dive into Stephen King's The Stand. And Chris has never read The Stand. And Nat Cassidy is a Stephen King superfan. So along with the host of the podcast, the three of them are going through all the books in The Stand one by one. And so that is how I learned about Chris Panettiere. He's published a few other novels that were horror adjacent. He's also an artist, and he designs album covers for like death metal bands, which I think is pretty great. And so this book is his newest one. And the main character is a man in his 50s named Sunday who's trying to take care of his mother. So he gets a job cleaning out porta potties. And in the process of cleaning the porta potty at the local county fair, he discovers this portal, essentially, that goes to this other realm where there's this dark carnival that is haunted by this specter of like an evil carny magician, essentially. And people start disappearing all over the state. And so he has to try to figure out what's going wrong. And what do you expect? Like dark carnival, porta potties, and a book called Shitshow. Like, it is what it is. It's a lot of fun. Next, continuing with the Rivers of London series by Ben Aaronovitch, I read the third book in the series, Whispers Underground. And, this is an urban fantasy set in contemporary London with a mixed race main character who is a police officer who has stumbled his way into working for the magical division of the police department. And I'm really liking these books. I think of the three of them, there are 10. The 10th one was just released in 2025. This is book 3. Of the 3, this is the weakest, I think, of them, in part because the there isn't a lot of growth for the character. In the first two books, you saw a lot of internal growth for the character and for a lot of the ancillary characters. And in this one, it doesn't seem to be a lot of internal narrative. And the investigation they go on is fun, but things just kind of fall into place. They do some good policing, but there's just it didn't feel nearly as meaty as the previous two. Yet it was still fun. I think the writing is really playful. The writing really pushes you along. The writing is really self-aware, and it's a good book. If you like the previous two books, then I think it's worth picking up. I'm planning on continuing the series. This one, just of the first three, this has been my least favorite so far. Next book I want to talk about is called Hazelthorn. This is by C.G. Drews, and this is an advanced reader copy. It comes out in the end of October, so I'll have a full review then. C.G. Drews wrote Don't Let the Forest In, which I reviewed last year, which I really, really enjoyed. And that was her debut novel, I believe. And she has an adult novel. So this is also YA. They're both dark YA. She has her adult debut is coming out next year in March. So this one, Hazelthorn, is another YA, like a dark YA story about a 17-year-old who grows up in this mansion that is called Hazelthorn. And his parents died when he was 10 in a car accident, and so the owner of this mansion is his guardian, but he stays locked in his room his whole life. He's not allowed to leave because he's very sick. He's very sickly, and he has to be given special medicine every day by the butler, basically, because he only sees his guardian or the butler, and even then very infrequently. So he leads this very kind of isolated life. And then at the beginning of the book, his guardian dies, and all of a sudden all these other people start flooding the estate, and you find out that there are mysteries in the garden behind the estate that lead directly to why he stays locked in a room his whole life. And so he's trying to figure out who he is and what role he has in this estate and what role the guardian has in the death of his parents and so on. So that's kind of the mystery that goes along with it. And I will have more to say about it in my full review at the end of the month. Next, I want to talk about Found 2, More Stories of Found Footage Horror, edited by Andrew Cole and Gabino Iglesias. So I read the first volume of this a few months ago, maybe at the end of last year, and I really enjoyed it. And this is another 16 or 18 stories that are all inspired by found footage horror. And this was okay. It wasn't great. I liked the first volume more. It's interesting to have a bunch of short stories inspired by found footage cinema, right? Because, found footage cinema, we could probably think of, the pioneer maybe of found footage would probably be Cannibal Holocaust in 1980. I'm sure there were examples before then, but that's the one most people think of. But really, it wasn't until the Blair Witch Project in 1999 that it really blew up in the cultural zeitgeist. And so a lot of these stories are basing their aesthetic on found footage cinema that has really been growing in the last 2.5 decades. Yet, epistolary novels have existed. I think the first one was in the middle of the 18th century, right? And so epistolary novels are the clear precursor to found footage cinema. And obviously there is Dracula, which was written almost 130 years ago. So having horror novels that are told in an epistolary format isn't new. Yet somehow a lot of these stories, they seem to forget the fact that literature did it first, and they're finding their inspiration in the cinema and not in the fact that literature has been doing this kind of, genre mashup and pastiche storytelling for a long time. So I just think that they weren't really exploring the boundaries of the genre as much as they could. Not horror, but the format, rather, of what it means to be found footage, what it means to be an epistolary story. Some of them in here are quite good. There is a combination of there's one that is a combination of Amber Alerts and messages from the government on your phone, and then text message threads between different people. That one I thought was really great. What a lot of them tend to do are they combine typical traditional narrative with found footage. So the characters in the narrative then experience a found footage phenomena of some sort. And those are interesting, blurring the line between traditional narrative and found footage. And there's some that are transcripts of videotapes. And those really feel like they want to be short films, rather, not stories. Those ones don't feel, some of them are really good. There's actually one by Chris Panettiere in here. And I liked it quite a lot. But it doesn't feel like it's exploiting the opportunities that the written word gives you. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it is just aping the cinema and not exploring how new types of liminal places can be explored. Especially if you go back to the idea that found footage as a literary genre has existed, since the middle of the 18th century. So if you like short stories, if you like short horror fiction, this is good. I would recommend the first volume a little more, but this one is also fun. Next book to talk about, and actually two books at the same time. So the first one is The September House by Carissa Orlando. And I've had this book for quite a while. I mean, you can see I have the hardcover of it, and I brought it with me to India from America, and I just read it now. I thought it'd be appropriate to read in September. And this is a haunted house book. It's an interesting version of a haunted house story because the main character is, a middle-aged woman, and her husband move into this haunted house after her daughter has moved out for college. And they find out right away the house is haunted, but she's determined that this is their dream house. They've never owned a house before. They've always rented, and they're not leaving. And it doesn't matter if the walls bleed. It doesn't matter if there are ghost children. All you have to do is set up rules to understand how to navigate the difficulties, and you can get around them. And September happens to be the worst month of the year when things get really off the rails. Meanwhile, at the start of the story, the father disappears or has disappeared, and he's been gone for over a month. And so the daughter, who has never visited their haunted house, they've always found a way to keep her away, says, I need to find dad. And so she comes for the first time to visit the house. And the mother's only goal doesn't seem to really be about finding her husband. She's sure he'll show up eventually, but she doesn't want her daughter to realize her house is haunted. So she's trying to go through all of her rules to make sure that none of the ghosts materialize in front of her daughter. And you learn that there is a dark history in this family, and the way the mother organizes her life and the way she's able to engage in the supernatural or the complicated or, the difficulties that come her way have to do with the relationship she had with her husband and with her daughter. And I thought it was really good. It is a debut novel, but it doesn't read like one. And it's an interesting take on the haunted house genre because, our main character is this middle-aged woman, or actually maybe above middle age. And since her daughter doesn't ever see any of the haunting, she starts believing that her mother is going crazy and has dementia. But the whole story is told from the point of view of the mother. And so whether or not she really is haunted or she's making it up, and what happened to her husband, did he really leave her like she said? Or did something else happen? What is going on? You only get it from her perspective. And then she starts doubting herself the more her daughter investigates into what's going on. So there is this constant tension, internal tension, that I think is really, really well done. And this I paired with, so I read this physical book while listening to the audiobook of Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. And that is another type of haunted house story. So I was reading two haunted house stories at the same time. And Rachel Harrison is often considered the queen of millennial horror. And sometimes her writing is a little bit too, it's too millennial for me, if that makes sense. I don't know what that means. Her writing is a little bit too playful for me, a little bit. I recently read So Thirsty, I think it's called, about a vampire story. And I can appreciate her writing and her plotting and her character work, but there's something about the way it all goes together that it isn't that it's twee. It's just that there's a snarkiness to it, I think, that that isn't my preferred style. And that isn't as apparent in this, but it is there a little bit. The story in this is that you have three sisters who their father and their mother divorced when they were young, and our main protagonist is the youngest of those three sisters, and their mother moved to her own house, which then she claimed to be possessed. So it's not haunted, but possessed by a demon of some sort. The house itself is possessed by a demon, and their mother was an alcoholic and abusive, and that is the story these three sisters have told themselves. And they have cut their mother out of their life and been living with their father. And now they're all adults, and their mother has died. That's the opening. And they realize that they've inherited this house. And so the youngest daughter wants to go back to the house, and she is a professional influencer and a style manager. She's 25, her whole life is online, and so she thinks she can flip this house and she can sell it, but before that she can use it as an online project to show to her many tens of thousands of followers and blah blah blah. But then so she starts going back to this house, and she realizes she doesn't really have any memories of the house, and everything she remembers is in little bits and pieces and what her sisters and her father told her. So she doubts her memory. She doubts the authenticity of the story as told by the rest of her family. And meanwhile, her mother had written a book about her time in the house. And after the divorce, her mother had married a demonologist, and they'd written this book together. And she finds a copy of this book, and in the book, it is annotated by her mother, telling her the truth, the footnotes behind everything in the book. And so she is trying to live in this house and to flip it. Meanwhile, things start happening in the house. And so whether or not the house really is possessed or there is some sort of mental health crisis that she's going through, that her mother also went through, that she inherited from her mother, including substance abuse and things like this. So again, there is this doubt as to whether or not the house is really haunted or if the family is haunted. And there's a doubt about authenticity and honesty and what it means to be a family and what it means to remember your own life and to have some sort of control over how you exist in the world. So I enjoyed this one. I thought it was really fun reading these two haunted house stories back to back. I mean, contemporary haunted house stories almost all are looking at trauma and psychological abuse of some sort, right? Like that seems to be like the bread and butter of contemporary haunted house stories, even when there is a real haunting. And so most of the books do this balance of trying to see, is this house really haunted, or is there something else going on, or is it a combination of both? And these two books did it in different ways. I like that the main character of this was this young woman who I found deplorable. Like, I did not like spending time with her at all, because she was written like to a T, and she even said, like, acknowledged, like, she's a brat, like this is who she is, and she just doesn't have time for like emotional connections with people, because it's her life is lived online, as a 25-year-old in 2020. Like, that's how you exist. I thought it was much better than So Thirsty, and there was still like a snarkiness and like a millennial cynicism to the writing style that isn't my favorite, but I did enjoy it. Next book is Monstrous Little Voices, New Tales from Shakespeare's Fantasy World. This I loved. This is 5 novellas from 5 different contemporary fantasy authors, and they are interlinked novellas that are telling a story within the world of Shakespeare, like on the edges of what Shakespeare has already told. And so each of them takes characters from different Shakespeare plays and mashes them up into this pastiche story. The overarching idea is that there is the War of the Medicis, and Oberon and Titania have different opinions about how much of a role they should play in the human world. And so the overarching story that the Fey world does exist, and Oberon and Titania exist, and how much they do or don't intercede in human affairs, is, they have different opinions about what their role in that is. And I thought these stories were great. The 5 authors involved are Jonathan Barnes, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Emma Newman, Foz Meadows, and Kate Hartfeld. And they, pull characters from The Tempest. The first story is following main characters from The Tempest, but then also As You Like It, obviously Midsummer Night's Dream. They reference easily half a dozen different Shakespeare plays, and I thought they were great. My favorite one was by Adrian Tchaikovsky. He's the one that is like the most meta of all of them. He has Macbeth as one of his characters, but mind you, Macbeth would take place 500 years before the events of this story rather. And he has a whole rationale as to why Macbeth still exists and is alive now, or maybe unalive, in this world, 500 years after the events of the play Macbeth. And he has become like a warlord who serves Hecate. So Hecate plays a major role in the overarching story as well. It seems like Adrian Tchaikovsky's story has the most kind of Easter eggs throughout it, including, if you ever worked in a theater, you never say the word Macbeth in a theater. It's always that Scottish play, because there is a superstition among theater folk that, Macbeth is a cursed play. And unless you're actually performing the play in your theater, to mention the name Macbeth would cause bad things to happen. Sandbags fall out of the sky, all these accidents happen. So you'd only reference that Scottish play. You would never call it Macbeth. You never use the word Macbeth in a theater. Like, that is a theater superstition. And Tchaikovsky references that. At one point, someone says the name, "Oh, you mean Macbeth?" And everyone goes, "Shh, you mean the Scotsman." It's great. It's so fun. The way different authors choose to try to parallel Shakespearean language, I think, is fun, because these are all narratives. They're not plays. And so some use like florid kind of Shakespearean language in their dialogue, but then the rest of the narrative is done in more contemporary prose. Others do all contemporary language, and others do a mix, and it's great. The last story by Jonathan Barnes is like this real meta story about a woman named Anne Shakespeare, whose husband is a glove maker and lives in Victorian England and disappears one day. What I think is really wonderful about this, and somehow even these 5 novellas all stand on their own, yet they work together really well, and they tell a coherent story that is enjoyable. And it's really looking at identity and ownership of yourself. There's a really beautiful passage in the first section, which is by Foz Meadows, and this is starring Miranda from The Tempest. And the premise of that story is, at the end of The Tempest, right, Miranda married the King of Spain or something like this. And this is a year after that, where she doesn't really want to be married to the King of Spain. She's 15 years old, and she has faked her own death to escape. And now she is going to Titania to visit Titania, to be asked to be allowed to live at Titania's court. And Puck is accompanying her on the road. In order for her to be a deputy at Titania's court, she has to not walk the fairy road. She has to walk the mortal road to arrive to Titania and then request the boon of being there. And so as she's traveling the road, she's disguised as a man named Moran instead of Miranda. And her story is this really interesting reflection on identity and what it means to live in these boxes that people make for you. And they have this really wonderful monologue where they say, "The moon has phases, does it not? We call it full and half and harvest, but through its wax and wane, it remains the moon, and we love it no less. Must I be any different? I must not, for I am not. My heart is a moon, and some days I am full and bright within myself, a shape that fits my name, and then I fade, and mirrors show only a half-light shared with a silhouette, an absence my form reflects. And then, in the dark, I am dark altogether, until I regrow again. Why should such a thing be any more difficult to grasp than the fact that some think me dead, and yet I live? The contradiction is only in their perception of what I am. And though killing me would perhaps solve it to their satisfaction, it would not undo the truth of me." So this collection I think is great. I highly recommend it if you like Shakespeare, if you like contemporary fantasy. This is a really beautiful intersection of those two things. 2 books left. The next book I want to talk about is Wolfsong. This is the first book in the Green Creek Quartet by T.J. Klune. It is a contemporary queer werewolf story. This first one is very much a coming-of-age story. We meet our main character, who's named Ox. We meet him when he's 12, and his father is leaving. And his father says, "Look, Ox, I love you, but you're kind of dumb, and I can't be here anymore, and I can't see what's going to happen to you because it's going to break my heart, and, the world just gives you shit, so you have to just deal with it." And then he leaves. And that is how we're introduced to our main character, as he is, abandoned by his father. So he and his mother are doing the best they can. They live in the small town of Green Creek, and he's good. He's not dumb. He's not bright. He's slow. But, he's getting all B's in school. We meet him in high school. He's getting B's, maybe a C here and there. But he also is working at the garage. And so he finds this found family in all of the people that work at the garage where his father used to work. And so you have this really beautiful found family aspect. And all of a sudden, a new family moves in their house down the lane. And you quickly find out that they are werewolves and shapeshifter werewolves. It's a little bit different mythology of the werewolf mythos. And it kind of goes from there. And I thought it was great. And there are 4 books. Like I said, it's a quartet. The next book is called Ravensong. And I literally just today, it came in my hold from Libby. So hopefully I'll be reading that soon. And I'll talk more about it, I think, when I finish all of them. But, it isn't a YA story, and he says very explicitly this is not for children. And there is a little bit of spice. There are 2 scenes closer to the end, which I would say are 18 plus. They're graphic, but they aren't gratuitous and they aren't over the top. It isn't smutty, but there are some spicy scenes, 2 spicy scenes in this book that do kind of require 18 plus warnings. But, there is this kind of tender love story that is running parallel with learning who you are as an individual, and then who you are as viewed by the world, and who you are as the person you want to be, and how do those things interact and overlap. I mean, werewolf stories are always a lot of fun, and any story that is based in transformation, right? It's good for A, coming of age and puberty, and B, coming into your own identity, especially queer stories, overlap with transformative stories in really exciting ways. And this story takes place in a much larger mythical world. So we've met werewolves, and we met a witch, but there are obviously other supernatural beings that I imagine we'll meet some of as we continue throughout the series. Just having read the first book, I do recommend it, and I'm looking forward to the rest. And the last book I want to talk about is Fool's Fate. I finally finished the Tawny Man trilogy by Robin Hobb. So the Tawny Man trilogy is the 3rd trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings saga, which is 16 books long. So I've read the first 9 books. I have 7 books left. And the Tawny Man trilogy, and as well as the Farseer trilogy, that's the 1st and the 3rd trilogies in the series, both are told in this first-person retrospective style, following the main character of Fitz. And now in this series, he is in his mid-30s. He was a young boy. He was 6 when the series started, in the Farseer trilogy. And they're very slow-moving. They're very atmospheric. They're very contemplative. Compare that to the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is the 2nd trilogy, which follows in a whole different set of characters in a different part of the world. And it's told from multiple characters' perspectives. And so that one feels much more dynamic. It feels like it's moving quite a lot. Whereas this is much more reflective. and I enjoyed it. I didn't find it too slow. There's not a lot that happens. I think narratively, the events of all three of these books, all three of these are almost 900 pages long, or more than 900, between 850 and 910, I think, between the three of them. They could all be combined into one book, narratively. You did not need 2,700 pages to tell this story, but the way it is told, you really have this emotional connection with not just the main character, but a whole group of ancillary characters. So I enjoyed it quite a lot. Like I think I read this in 3 days or something like this. I really enjoyed it. I am frustrated with the main character of Fitz. There's two types of magic in this world, at least that our characters know about. One is called the wit, and that is more of an emotional, like earthy kind of magic. It is also related to animals, being able to relate to and understand animals, communicate with some animals. And then there's a type of magic called the skill, which is more intellectual. And so you have your emotional magic and your intellectual magic. And the main character of Fitz happens to have both. And for various different reasons, the wit is like considered a beastly magic. And so there are people that are like murdered for it in the streets. They're drawn and quartered. And there are groups trying to make it more respectable. They call themselves the old blood, not the witted. And they're trying to make it socially acceptable, but he is ashamed of having this magic. And he is just constantly refusing to like engage in magic in ways that seem like they'd be helpful. Like throughout the stories, we see he's most powerful when he uses his wit and his skill in combination. And there are reasons, like there are certain like narrative obstacles from him using his magic abilities, but really it feels like some of it just feels like narrative convenience, unfortunately, given the circumstances that he's in and what the potential outcomes could be. He feels like he's constantly twiddling his thumbs in ways that are really frustrating. And some of it feel appropriate for his character, and some of it just feel like Hobb is taking her time with the story and needs to create more obstacles. And if he really was exploiting both of his magics to the best of his ability, then the story would be a lot faster. So I'm a little bit frustrated with Fitz for that reason, and partly him as a person, and partly for narrative reasons. I think that he is a little wishy-washy, and so I'm hoping that he gets a little bit more of a spine and a backbone in upcoming books. The next 4 books in the series are the Rainwilds Chronicles, and I don't think we're following Fitz in those. I think we're jumping to another part of the world, so maybe it'll be good to take a little bit of a break from him. I'll probably try to do a review of this trilogy. I've done a review of the Lives of Traitors trilogy as well as a review of the Farseer trilogy. I'll link those down in my description. I'll try to do a review of this whole trilogy. I don't know when that's going to be, but we'll see. I did enjoy the trilogy quite a lot, and I'm looking forward to the remaining 7 books in the saga. And that's it. Those are the 14 books that I finished this month, which was a lot, especially some of them were quite big. And not all of them were great, but I had a good time with all of them. Now, what am I reading right now? I'm currently reading 2 books, 1 audiobook and 1 print book. So the audiobook is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. I'm about 1/3 through, and I don't know how I feel about it quite yet. I'm listening to the audiobook. I'm enjoying the narration. The premise of it is a young woman who's born in 1910, and she keeps dying and being reborn over again, and reborn as herself and living her life again. She doesn't have full knowledge that this is what's going on, but she experiences some sort of deja vu, some sort of like understanding of what's going on to try to help avoid whatever mistake caused her to die in the first place. I'm enjoying the writing so far. I just think that the narrative conceit of, this Groundhog Day of living the same event over and over and over again, like there needs to be a reason the story is being told this way, and I haven't found that reason yet. But like I said, I'm only 1/3 of the way through, so maybe it will show up. The next book I'm reading is The West Passage by Jared Pachechik, and this is another one of the Ursula K. Le Guin shortlist awards for the 2025 prize. And after this, I still have 1 book left. And originally I was planning on making a bunch of small videos. I was planning on doing 3 videos. There are 8 books on the shortlist, and the winner is going to be announced on October 21st. So my plan had been to do a video for the first 3 books, then a video covering the next 3 books, and then a video covering the final 2 books, as well as my overall pick. And I haven't had the energy to do that. So I'm hoping to do 1 video where I will cover all 8 books, and I'll say which were my favorite. And hopefully that video will be out before the 21st, which is when the actual prize is awarded. So this is the 7th book of the 8 on the shortlist. And then I have 1 book left, and that I will be reading in the next week or so. So those are the 2 books I'm reading right now. What do I have coming up? What books am I planning on? So starting this week, I have a buddy read of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a buddy read with Pat, as well as Alan and Marie Andrea. And I've read The Martian. I read it quite a long time ago, right when it was released, and I enjoyed it. And I just never picked this up. It's been on my TBR for a long time. And so I was invited to be part of this buddy read. So I'm excited for that. We're going to take our time with it, read it over the course of 3 weeks, I think. So I probably won't have much more to say about it until the end of the month, if I'm around to make a video at the end of the month. But I'm excited to read it. I do like The Martian quite a lot, and this one is really well regarded. The next book I definitely want to read, and then maybe the next week or so, is The Archangels of Funk by Andrea Hairston. And this is the last book on the Ursula K. Le Guin shortlist for 2025. And then the only other things I have really planned for October, like I said, I plan on reading Ravensong. That is the next book in the Green Creek Quartet by T.J. Klune, and I did just receive it from Libby this morning, so hopefully I'll be reading that soon. And then the only other thing that I want to read is the Spectral Inspector series by Cooper S. Beckett. Now, I have the first 3 books, As Good as She Gets, actually As Good as Gone, As Good Riddance, and As Good as She Gets are the first 3 books in the series. There's a 4th book that was released this year. I bought these over a year and a half ago with the intent to read them last October as part of the Occult Detective October reading event, and it never happened. And so I'm hoping to read them this year as part of that. So that is the plan. I don't know if I'll read all 3. I'm definitely going to read the first one. I'm very strongly committed to that. And then if I have time, like I said, I don't know how much free time I'll have, so I may not be able to read the others. But if I can, I will read all 3 of these this month. That is part of the plan. Now, I don't have a copy of the 4th one. I'd rather a paperback to go with these as opposed to a soft copy. And the paperbacks I can't get here in India very easily. So I will see if I do. Maybe I'll try to get it from the library or something to read the 4th one if I get really into these. We'll see. I don't know. And that's it. Those are my plans for reading on October. So there's not a lot of books. There's only, well, I guess there's these 3 and then the 3 others. So I have 6 books kind of planned. We'll see if I get through all of them. And then after that, who knows? And coming up on the channel, like I said, there are a bunch of reviews that are scheduled for October of books that I've already finished. I just have to make the reviews for, and hopefully I'll be able to do those. And then I do want to do a video about the Ursula K. Le Guin Award after I finished all 8 of those books. So I have 1.5 books left to finish that, and that hopefully will be out before the 21st, which is when the award is announced. Or maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll do it after the 21st, and I will respond to what the judges picked to see if that was the one I wanted. I don't know. Hopefully sometime in October there'll be a video covering all 8 of those books. Other than that, I don't really have any BookTube plans. I already mentioned that even if I had plans and I wasn't feeling in a creative rut right now, the next 3 months are really going to be full for me, and it's easy for me to find 20 minutes here and there to read a few chapters, but to make videos takes a lot more energy and a lot more time. So even if I wasn't kind of in a BookTube creator rut, I don't know if I'd have the time, or even, I won't be around a computer for at least 6 of those weeks, so I won't be able to make videos. I'll just say that if you don't see any videos from me, it's not because I've left, it's not because I'm done with BookTube, it's just because this combination of, not having a lot of motivation and also not being near a computer or having free time. So when those 2 things overlap, then I'm going to do the best I can. But I appreciate all of you who have hung out with me for this long. I know this is a long video. I really do appreciate all of you, and I appreciate being part of this community, and I appreciate all the feedback you give me. So I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about the books I read this month, of course, about my plans for next month, but also just about BookTube in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, your comments, your inspiration, your advice, all of those things down below in the comments. But for now, I will say thank you for spending this time with me. I really do appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.